Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and I had one of my followers ask me, how about if you talk about biplanes? Because biplanes are different. And yes, they are. Biplanes are definitely different. And you know, when I got my biplane, my Great Lakes, I realized this thing is different. Okay, well, how are they different? Well, I'm out here in the source of all knowledge. This is where I keep my monoplane here. It's good to have two engines if you only have good wing. But I thought, well, heck, I'll go out to the source of all knowledge out in my toy box, the hangar, and I'll see what I can find out. Because I'm sure I've got some information. So, oh, by the way, I'm pretty sorry about this. I keep saying I'm going to clean up my hangar, okay? I'm going to do it in the winter. It's winter now. I keep saying I'm going to do it in the winter because that's when I'll have time. Well, I don't have time. It's the holidays. There's all sorts of stuff going on. My wife calls this my toy box, by the way. So I'll do it in the summer. Well, in the summer you want to fly. Okay, well, so you'll have to excuse it. This is a mess. Kids will have to clean it up eventually. But I said, oh, I'll get some old textbooks here. This is one of the bookcases. I got bookcases all over the place, but I thought, well, let's look some stuff up. Let's get the old test pilot school books out here from the late 70s. Let's see. I'm sure they must have something. Oh, that wasn't good. I'm sure they must have something about biplanes in here because this is written in the late 70s. And see, April 77. That's fairly close to Wright Brothers, almost as close as we are to 77 now. But okay, background: external stores, carriage, separation testing. That's not going to do it. The external stores they used back then, they just took a bomb and they handed it out. Okay, that's not going to work. Yeah, external stores. Yeah, that's not it. Looking for biplanes. No, well, oh, there's a Snoopy. No, that's close. Human factors. Okay, that's human factors. We all know Snoopy flew biplanes. Famous World War I ace. There he is. Okay, well, no. He's not talking about biplanes. Well, let's look some more. Oh, electronics. Well, they didn't really have electronics back then when the Wright brothers were flying. Look at these NPN, PNP transistors. Yeah, okay, and they're all talking about how they work. Yep, okay, well, that's not going to help me. Okay, electro-optical systems. No, that's not going to do it. Well, I don't know. This is discouraging. That's no good. No, okay, well, let's try another one here. I got 3 books here. This is one. Okay, let's get the other books out here. Let's find another one, see if it's any better. I'm just going to set this one up here for a minute. That fell out of okay, performance. Well, that's good, because we all know biplanes perform. Okay, they perform pretty well, too. They got a lot of lift. Okay, National Technical Information Service. Okay, this is written in 73. Performance. Well, it's got an F-15 on it. That had a lot of performance. Oh, Joe Guthrie. He was a super cool guy. Wore a cowboy hat when he when he walked out to the airplane. Really cool guy. No, I'm not seeing any biplanes here. Oh, they're talking about supersonic flight. Oh, Mach cone. No, you didn't get any Mach cones off the Wright brothers, and I don't get any. Nope, that's a spacecraft. Kind of primitive, but that's yeah. Okay, not finding anything here. Airspeed indicator. Well, that's cool. Equivalent airspeed. Yeah, I'm not sure if it matters all that much. We're not dealing with compressibility or anything. Yeah, more equations. Lift. Well, that's good. It's lift. We're talking about lift. No, that's not going to do it either. All right. Well, I got one last book here. Let's look at one last book. Okay. We'll take a look at that. What's the last one? Stability and control. Okay. Well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what we're looking for. All right. We'll look at this one here. Okay. Stability and control. No. I don't know. Let's take a look here. Variable stability demonstration program. Oh, that's the old CalSpan. Longitudinal static stability. Okay, this is good. That's not a biplane. Dynamic stability, that's always good. Highlighted stuff must have been important. Okay. Oh, T-38, good airplane, but nope. Nope, no biplanes. Nope. Yeah, that's definitely not a biplane. Okay, that's not a biplane. We're not having much luck here. All right. Well, we're going to have to look elsewhere. I got books at home. That was not very fruitful. Okay, we're going to have to go and look at books at home. Well, all right. That's the next adventure. We'll leave the great toy box in the sky here, and we'll go see what we can find at home. Well, let's take a break from the great pub search, because I didn't have a lot of luck initially finding a lot of information. You know, this is just an airplane that isn't used except for a little niche group of people who like aerobatics and like old airplanes. So, what the heck? Let's just go up and fly, because that's a fun thing. And you know, you don't necessarily, if you got a lot of piloting experience, you don't necessarily have to understand everything about an airplane just to go up and fly it. You'll figure it out pretty quick. And one of the things you figure out is this airplane has a lot of drag. It doesn't have flaps. It really doesn't need flaps. I've had to do very little slipping in it because it just comes out of the sky very nicely. And I can fly nice, tight, idle patterns in the airplane. And these airplanes, tail draggers, conventional gear airplanes, they are just made for grass strips. Because if you get a little bit of side loads or stuff like that, you know, it slips around a little bit. The concrete tends to grab the tires, and the grass can be a little softer too. Although, you know, if you got a good airfield that's been there for a long time, it's nice and firm. But, you know, there's a lot to know about this old design. It's very interesting. Like, you know, the Wright brothers started out with it, you know. That must not have been too bad. Well, why did they? Well, most of it is for structural strength. You can make a box structure like this, and you don't have as beefy of spars or as much weight as a cantilever wing, so you can get away with a lot lighter materials. And you have bracing wires on the inside of the wings they're covered up here in this example. You have drag wires, anti-drag wires, and then of course you've got on this airplane you've got the external structure. You've got the interplane struts. You've got the bracing between the upper wing and the fuselage there. And now you notice, of course, you've got stagger. Now, why do you stagger the wings? Well, there's a very good reason to do that, because the low pressure on the top of the bottom wing and the high pressure on the bottom of the top wing interfere with each other, and they reduce lift. So if you just have the wings positioned directly one on top of the other, you lose about 10 to 15% of lift because of that interference. So what they do is they stagger them. And if you move the upper wing forward, that's called a positive stagger. Okay, there are some airplanes that the upper wing is moved back, and I'm going to point those out, and you probably know what they are anyway. But like I said, this is just a fun airplane to fly, and you can have a lot of fun flying, even if you don't have all the concepts down. But there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of history on these airplanes, and just flying an open cockpit airplane is just a lot of fun. But okay, we're going to complete the search here for documentation, and then I'm going to lay it all out with a bunch of examples. So just hang in there. We'll get to it here shortly. Thanks for watching, and we'll have this all nicely laid out for you. All right, so the search continues. I've got to find some information on biplanes. Well, I got a lot of books out of my library and I laid them out here. Well, let's take a look. Well, that's way too modern. That's not going to do. Well, that's a fun story about Richard Bach flying his biplane around. He gets into some nasty weather. But a guy who flies a Stearman all over the place, all over the U.S. He doesn't talk about the design. Oh, modern airmanship. I bet that does it. No, it's written in '57. Yeah, that's that's a little too modern. Yeah, that's not going to do it. Way too modern. Aircraft performance. Yeah, it's too modern. Avro. Well, they did a lot of stuff. They did a lot of biplane stuff. That's kind of cool. And well, a lot of more advanced stuff. That was a good book. I got that actually from the British Aerospace people when I went over to do a flight evaluation on the BAE 146. That was kind of cool. They gave me some history. This is good. A guy restores an old Waco, flies it around. That's kind of neat. But they're not talking about biplanes. Black Cats and Outside Loops, Tex Rankin. He was a cool guy flying the Great Lakes. Knights of the Air. Well, they used it in, World War One. Flew around. These airplanes, the engines had castor oil in them, and it would spray back on the pilots. You know what happens when you ingest a lot of castor oil? Yeah, this isn't quite the lore of the fighter pilot that you want. No, not at all. This is my graduate level aerodynamics course, Flight Dynamics of Rigid and Elastic Airplanes. This book, this is an expensive one. This is 25 bucks. Yeah, lots of equations. Now, highlighted some stuff, must have been important. Oh, they like matrices. This is not doing it. This is still not doing it. Yeah, too many high-speed airplanes. That's definitely not a biplane. But I finally found it. This book, Monoplanes and Biplanes, Their Design and Construction Operation. Grover Cleveland Loring. This book was written in 1910. Now, you think that's probably pretty early. That's 7 years after the Wright brothers flew. But surprisingly, they really were pretty advanced. They had a lot of graphs, charts. They had done a lot of research. They really knew what they were doing. And I had to go this far back, okay? We're talking about over 110 years back to find out anything that really talks about biplanes. And, the interesting thing about it is a lot of these airplanes back then, this was before they really figured out how they wanted to do things. And there was a lack of standardization. The way you controlled the elevator in one airplane, the rudder in another, and the ailerons could be totally different. You could have totally different controls, wheels, sticks. You moved your body back and forth. Man, you talk about, guys talking about how hard it is to go from a 172 to a 152, that was nothing compared to what these guys put up. But anyway, there's a lot of neat things about biplanes, and I got a lot of information now, and I'm going to discuss that with examples. Stay tuned. All right, so this is the Boeing Stearman Model 75 PT-13D. This was built in Wichita. I used to live in Wichita, but this was before my time. But this was used as trainer for pilots in World War II. And for most people, this is a biplane. You see it's got the standard two wings. Well, what is a biplane? That's a definition of a biplane. It's a fixed-wing aircraft with two main wings stacked, one on top above the other. And the first biplane to fly, of course, we all know was the Wright brothers. Now, what's the advantage of the biplane? Well, the biplane has a structural advantage over the monoplane, but it produces more drag than a monoplane wing. And improved structural techniques came along, and the biplane as a frontline type of airplane was pretty much made obsolete by the 1930s. Now here's the aircraft used in the movie The Great Waldo Pepper, and this was a very basic aircraft, a very early biplane at the time, and they didn't understand the interference drag between the upper wing and the lower wing. And like I mentioned earlier, because the interference drag, you don't get the lift that you would with the same wing area of a monowing airplane. You get a reduction in efficiency, and they typically say, I've heard various figures, but they say that a typical biplane will get 70% of the efficiency that a monowing airplane would have. So here, there is no stagger. Well, most of the stagger you have is positive stagger, where you move the upper wing forward. And by moving the upper wing forward, you get away from the two wings interfering with each other as much, and you reduce that interference drag. Now, biplanes have a lot of drag, which is nice. They come down nicely. They have a lot of drag, a lot of lift. You can turn nicely, but by putting the two wings directly over each other, you kind of negate the effect of the lift from both wings. So they're losing 10 to 15% here. So you want stagger either forward or back, and I'll show you an example of the back stagger. Most of the stagger on these type of airplanes, the biplanes, are forward stagger. Well, this is a Gloucester Gladiator, and although I mentioned biplanes pretty much became obsolete by the 30s, we and other countries, other allies, actually entered World War II with biplanes. One of the advantages, if you will, of war is rapid technological advancement. And as you can see, the biplanes became history as far as warfare very quickly. So here we have the Beech Stagger Wing, probably one of the most beautiful biplanes ever built. And because of the configuration of the cabin there, they move the upper wing aft to give the pilot better visibility. You get the advantage either way. Now this is a Russian design, the Polikarpov PO2. There are about 20,000 of these built by the Russians. And you notice the wings, they have the same area, the upper and the lower wing, which is not as common as you might think. It's often that the wings will have different area, and there's actually a specialized name for this. Now this is the Newport 17, and as you might notice, the lower wing has a smaller chord but a very similar span than the upper wing, and this is called a sesquiplane design. Now next time you're at a cocktail party with some young lady next to you, you might say, you know, I think the sesquiplane design of biplanes is much superior, and the reason is basically, and that's from the Latin word sesquiplane, means 1.5 wings. This arrangement can reduce drag and weight while retaining the biplane's structural advantages. The lower wing may have a significantly shorter span and reduced chord. I'm sure that will totally impress her. Now, this aircraft saw service between 1915 and 1917, and the Germans, after they shot a few of these down, were very impressed with the design, and they ended up copying it, obviously, to use on their aircraft during World War I. All right, well, this biplane is a 1930s Fiat CR42 Falco, and it's got what's known as Warren truss. And what these are very substantial truss that's used for bracing the upper and lower wing, and you don't have to worry about the flying and landing wires and the rigging, which can take a fair amount of extensive work, because usually there's a fair variation in the tension on the rigging wires, and you have to adjust them to get the airplane basically to fly right. So if you just have a bunch of solid struts you put on there, you don't have to worry about that aspect of rigging. And just for fun, I'm going to throw this in here. This is a 1909 Voisin biplane, and it's got curtains between the upper and lower wings, and also they kind of did that back in the tail area there. As you can imagine, this is a design that really didn't catch on. Well, this is a Hadley Page V/1500 4-bay or multi-bay biplane. As you made the biplanes bigger and bigger, in this case a bomber to hold more bombs, you had to have more bracing between the upper and the lower wing. And those vertical struts you see there are called bays. So as the wing would go out farther and farther, you needed more and more bays, as you can imagine, just looking at the thing for structural integrity. Now this is a SPAD, and you notice the auxiliary, or what they call auxiliary struts there. Later they used an N-type strut, and I have that on my Great Lakes, and a lot of the airplanes have it, and that just gives you a lot more rigidity and strength of structure. Now this is a Newport 23 with a single bay sesquiplane, and you notice here that they use a V structure. It's kind of interesting to notice all the different things that various manufacturers tried over the years. Now this is probably the biplane to end all biplanes. This is a Soviet Antonov AN2, and it's from the 1940s. And you notice, like I said, most of the times the bottom wing connects to the fuselage, and the upper wing there is floated and connected by cabane struts, etc. This actually is connected at both ends with one massive I-beam structure there, as you can see. Now, I was at an Airline Pilots Association symposium, and we had a guest Russian pilot come and talk to us. And he was actually a captain on the AN-174, but he had a picture of one of these AN twos, but it wasn't this nice. It was out, in a field. Weeds were growing up. Pieces were dangling all over it, and it just looked terrible. And he put this slide up and he said this was his airplane. The room was totally silent because we had heard rumors about Russian airliners and stuff like that. He turned and he looked at us and he said, "It's a joke." And then he had a picture of his real airplane. And here we go. This is Snoopy's airplane, the World War I Sopwith Camel. And I want to talk just a little bit about rigging, because you can see the rigging wires in there. And since biplanes don't have cantilever structures, they require rigging wires to maintain the rigidity. You just brace the whole thing and keep it tight. Now, early aircraft used just simple wire, either braided or plain. And during the First World War, the British Royal Aircraft Factory actually developed airfoil section wires. And that's, the wires you see now, because it's much better to have an airfoil section to reduce drag. And it actually also does increase strength. There were 4 types of wires that are used in biplane wing structures. You have the drag wires inside the wings to prevent the wings from being folded back against the fuselage, running inside a wing bay from the forward inboard corner to the rear outboard corner. You also have anti-drag wires that prevent the wings from moving forward when the aircraft stop, and they run in the opposite direction to the drag wires. Both of these are usually hidden in the wing structure because it's covered over, and I've got that in my wing structure, and I saw that as it was being built. If the structure is sufficiently strong, you can actually omit that, but one of the advantages of biplane is you can make a light structure. Now, they also have external lift wires to prevent the wings from folding up, and they run the underside of the outer wing to the lower wing root. And conversely, you have landing wires that prevent the wings from sagging and resist the force when an airplane is landing, and they run from the upper wing center to the outboard and lower wings. Now, you can use additional drag and anti-drag wires to brace the cabane struts. Those are back there on the center, attaching the fuselage to the wing. And you can use interplane struts, which also connect the upper and the lower wings together. Now, this is a Fleet Finch primary trainer, and you can see the wing stagger on it and also the end strut. It's, of course, very visible in the black paint here. Now, this is my Great Lakes, and you can also see the end strut out there. It's kind of at the edge of the picture. That's my son up there next to the cockpit. And you notice the upper wing actually has some sweet back, and you're going, well, is that for high-speed Mach characteristics? No, it's not, for the shockwaves and that. No, they actually found that if the wings were both straight, it had not the best spin characteristics, and this is a very aerobatic aircraft, and you wanted good spin characteristics. Now, here we are up at Oshkosh a few years ago at the Waco booth, and you can see my biplane there actually in the distance, and 727KR and one of the Waco YMFs in the foreground. You notice there really isn't the sweepback on the upper wing there. Apparently, it wasn't necessary in the design. Now, the Great Lakes used to be the aerobatic aircraft until the Pitts come along, and I can't end this presentation without talking about the absolutely beautifully designed and fun-to-fly Pitts aircraft. One of the greatest biplanes of all time. So, I hope you enjoyed that. There is an endless number of biplanes that we can talk about, but I hope I covered the major design, flight considerations, characteristics, and the various things that go into biplane design and operation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.